Right, Rabbi Isai, Sivan Tov Pevov, Hilchas Seder, page Sadi Base, Sivan Tov Pevov, Avois If Echad, Sif Aleph, Shir Kazayas. We know one has to have a kazayas to fulfill mitzvahs, halayla, for example, the kazayas of matzah, the kazayas of afikomen, kazayas of moror, and other kazayasim. How much is a kazayas? Says the Shulchan Aruch, shir kazayas. The shir of a kazayas is yesh obrim. Some say to have a kachatzi beitza. It is half of an egg. As we'll see, it's actually a machlokas. We'll see in the Mishnah Brura about that. The kazayas in one go. Don't eat it piecemeal, because this kazayas has to be eaten within the time frame called pras, which is either 2 minutes or 4 minutes or 9 minutes, but it has to be eaten within that time frame. Otherwise, it's just considered nibbling, not considered eating. So when it comes to vegetables, for example, if there are air gaps between the various pieces, one should squeeze the pieces together, between the bits of the yerek of the shire, shir hakazayis beirakas atzman v'loy ba'avish b'neim. Unexpected, unnecessary gaps between the pieces of the horseradish, for example, not included in the shir. It's just the horseradish itself. We will see, however, with regards to matzah, and that's the same with other foods, for example, cake and bread throughout the rest of the year. The natural air bubbles that's in bread, that's all included in the kazayas. The abnormal air bubbles, for example, well, obviously if a person has a bagel, he can't include a hole in the middle as part of his kazayas. Even if sometimes he has like a big bubble, like a type of blister on the bread, the air bubble is not included in the cheshbon of the kazayas. And furthermore, if a person squeezes a piece of bread and makes it very small, he's going to have to eat more bread in order to have a kazayas. But generally speaking, the general structure of a food item was all included in the kazayas. Says the Mishnah Brura, Sivkot Nalef, to have a kachatzi beit, so the Shulchan Aruch has brought here the opinion of Tosfos, the whole to kazayas is half of a egg. Now, the Mishnah Brura here brings, it's actually a machlokas. Take a look to Sivkot Nalef, to have a kachatzi beit, so bein and isim kibbos, a standard egg with its peel, is half of that is a kazayas, says the Shulchan Aruch. But das Rambam, according to Rambam, the kazayas to shlish beit, so it's actually small, it's only a third of an egg. They discuss this. What's the practical din? The mitzvah deraisa with regard to mitzvah in Torah, for example, mitzvah matzah is a biblical obligation to eat matzah on Seder night, on the first night of Pesach. Therefore, yesh lachmon should be strict for to have this larger size, half an egg. Unless he's ill, can't eat so much, then he could rely on the Rambam that says just a third of an egg. Lina and Mora, when it comes to Mora, and similar mitzvahs to Drabonon, the mitzvah to eat Mora is Drabonon, then if you just had a third of an egg, it'll be okay to rely on the Rambam. But ideally, given was making a bracha, a special birchas mitzvahs on the moror, then ideally, if possible, they should have, even for the moror, which is rabbinical, have the larger share. If Adam cholishness is weak, doesn't have to be ill, but just a weakness, then the kosher it's difficult for him. He can have a third of an egg. Now, with regard to benching, midrabon on a person benches on a kazayas min Torah when he's satiated with savota. Thereafter, when he's full, with Rabbanon from Kazayas, then Chain Bracha Chroina also with Rabbanon, the Bracha Chroina is always the Rabbanon on Kazayas. Sofi Brachas Lahakel, one requires a rule of Sofi Brachas Lahakel, he wouldn't make a Bracha Chroina unless he knows he had half an egg, which is the larger amount. On the Chatchila noch in Izar says the Mishnah Brura 3 lines up in the first column. He says one should ideally be careful. Don't put oneself into a position where he's got a question whether he should or shouldn't recite the bracha achrona. Therefore, so ideally, a person should ideally only have half an egg's worth of food. Or have or less than a third, significantly less than a third, to for sure avoid the area of doubt as to whether they'll have to make a bracha achrona, which is between a third and a half of a kabeh. Then yes, he says the Chofetz Chaim, in my opinion, appears that ideally a person should have anyway, when it comes to eating bread, throughout the year, a person should only have a kabeya of bread, an egg size, which is either double or 3 times the amount of a kazayis. Why is this? Surely one only needs a kazayis in order to bench. And with regards to bracha rishona, hamoitz is recited on any small amount, on any amount of food that makes a bracha rishona. Bracha achrona needs a kazayis. So why, when it comes to eating bread, one should have a kabeya? Interesting. Why is this? Says the Mishnah Berurah, don't forget, I'll tell you why. Because otherwise, yesh chashash bracha levatala. If a person doesn't have a kabeya of bread, there's a concern of bracha levatala, an invalid, wasteful bracha. Al bracha sheberach metchila al natila lezer poskim. Some poskim say when one washes in Tilas Yadayim, one doesn't have an absolute obligation to wash in Tilas Yadayim unless one's washing plans to eat a kabetza. So therefore, since that's the case, which is a large amount, and therefore when it comes to eating bread meal, they should ideally have a kabeya to ensure that the bracha he's reciting on the Tilas Yadayim is definitely valid and effective. And the reason one has a kabetza is because of the connection of Tumah and Tara, the halachos, with the reason one's obligated in washing in the first place could be only relevant if one has a kabetza. Now, the Shulchan Aruch says as follows. Mishnah says as follows. So let's get back to what we're saying. We're saying a kazayas. The Shulchan Aruch says is half a kabeya, and according to the Rambam, it's a third of kabeya. By the rice, one takes the larger amount, so it has half a kabeya. And like the Shulchan Aruch, and by the Rabbanans, there's more reason to be lenient with a third of a kabeya. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but there's another point to bear in mind, and that is as follows. But that you should know, it's not so simple that we can reckon the kazayas based on the eggs nowadays, because the Achronim who prove this is the Slach's opinion, and the Chasam Sofer, and it's known more recently as the Chazon Ish, that they say the eggs nowadays have become much smaller, ad lemechsa, even half the size that they were. They used to be much bigger. In earlier times, they've got ways of reckoning out and showing that the eggs have become actually smaller than they were in the times of Chazal. And according to this, Shulchan Aruch, who says one has half an egg and fulfills the mitzvah of matzah, etc., is considered a kazayis. Not so simple. We're going to have to double it in order to have the right amount of matzah, etc. Says the Mishnah Berurah. The Shari Tshuva says he says the Shari Tshuva, we can make a distinction. Do we have to go down this line and be strict and be concerned that the eggs have become smaller, etc.? But says the Shari Tshuva, that's only with regards to Doraisa mitzvahs, we should be strict. But by the Rabbanan mitzvahs, for example, Mora, Bisman Azeh, and Afikoven, and the 4 cups, the cases, for that one can be lenient and assume that the current egg size is correct, and one doesn't need to have so much. Yeah, says the Mishnah Berurah Benimse, comes out the Fizet. Bismanenu nowadays is chayav lechel matzah ad kashir be'er. A person when he eats matzah should have an absolute egg amount, because that is a kazayas. If we say that the eggs used to be double as big as they are now, so we have to double as much. And we're assuming that a kazayas is half a kabeya, so 2 kazayisim is one beya, and that's how much one should have for the deraisa mitzvah of matzah. But Mora, with regard to Mora, which is only midrabanan, yotza b'diavad one is yotza afim loyacha rak kishlish beya. Even if you only had a third of the current egg, means we're lenient. A, that the eggs we have are the same eggs in Bisman Chazal, and therefore a kazayas is a fraction of that. And B, what fraction of that is a kazayas? Well, we can be lenient, it's only a third of a beya, like the Rambam says, and one needn't be strict. This is half an egg, like the Tosfos. If you look there, the halacha discusses this whole point at length, and the Mishnah Berurah there says that when it comes to the deraisas, we should try and be machmir for the larger share. Kiddush Friday night, he considers a deraisa because the idea of Kiddush on Friday night is minat Torah, whether really ala kos is only midrabanan. This idea is minat Torah. Ideally, one has a larger kos, the larger kos on Friday night, and for a Kiddush during the day, which is based on clearly on a midrabanan, one has the smaller share. Practically speaking, The difference in size with regard to liquid is that the larger shir is 150 milliliters and the smaller shir is 86 milliliters, some say 75, but 86 is standard for Chaim Noah and 150 is the Chazon Ish. And the way to remember this is the gematria of Kos is 86. 86 milliliters is a smaller share, and Kos Hogun is gematria 150, which is the larger share. Kos Hogun means the fit, correct type of cup, not just a standard cup. Sivkot and base. One eats together the entire matzah. Well, ideally, ideally one swallows the entire kazayas matzah in one go, or at least eats it within Torich Kedei Achilas Pras. Of course, there's actually an Indian to have two kazasim of matzah, as we discussed in Sivan Tov Ayin Hey. The second kazayas obviously is clearly on the Drabonon anyway. One can be more lenient on the second kazayas, shear-wise. When it comes to eating vegetables, then one has to bear in mind the air gaps between the little pieces of vegetable are not included in the kazayas. Similarly, if there's an extra bump in a matzah, an abnormal type of bump, one has to ignore that to come to the correct amount of matzah to eat. If there's no extra additional bumps in the matzah, just the standard bumps, I feel even though it's soft, the standard soft type of spongy nature of our circus spike, spongy nature of a matzah, it doesn't need to be squeezed. That's included in the kazayas. That's the standard size of it, and that's included in the kazayas. Practically speaking, the bottom line over here in the Dirshu in the second column says, once somebody wants to fulfill the mitzvah of kazayas, without any doubt, should take a kazayas which is 25 grams, and thereby he'll fulfill all opinions. Of course, there's more lenient opinions, but that would cover him completely. That is the bottom line here in the Dirshu note. Finally, while we're on the topic of discussing how much a person has to bread and matzah a person needs to say the night, it's important to remember that with regards to eating bread at the beginning of a meal, as Rabbi Falkol of Ashalom will tell us, the biggest mistake a person can ever make in Hilchos Brachos is not to have a kazayas of bread at the beginning of a meal. I'll explain this. In fact, he said this at the Dush, you see him here in Gateshead when we finished Chelek Aleph, when we began Chelek Beis, which is to do with Hilchos Brachos. He said like this: first of all, a person does not bench if he didn't have a kazayas of bread in a bread meal. So if a person has less than a kazayas of bread, so he doesn't bench. Additionally, according to Mogen Avram, it's doubtful, and in fact, the Paskin will have to make brachos on all his food items that he eats during that meal, because they're not absolved by the hamoitzi he makes on the bread, because he's not having a kazayas of bread. So if a person washes it and says hamoitzi, doesn't have a kazayas of bread, and then starts eating all his food, all those food items have been eaten without bracha rishon. Additionally, he benches afterwards normal standard bracha achrona benching Birkas Hamazon, and he doesn't realize he was not obligated in that Birkas Hamazon. In fact, that was 4 brachas of Atola. The entire Birkas Hamazon was of Atola. Additionally, he's not recited bracha achrona on all the food items during the meal because they required alamichya or brin foshos, whatever it might be. Finally, according to the Mishnah over here, but really a person should have a kabeya in order for the Anatilis Yadayim bracha to be 100% valid, but at least a kazayis. If a person doesn't have a kazayis, then even the bracha of Anatilis Yadayim shouldn't be recited. So therefore, it's very important. The person has a bread meal, be it Shabbos, be it Pesach. Sometimes it's difficult. In the Pesach Sudas, a person's already had so much matzah, he doesn't have cheshik matzah. He should be aware that whatever happens at the beginning of the meal, have a kazayis of matzah, and thereby all the food he eats during the meal is absolved from a bracha rishona. The benching is at the end of the meal is obligatory. His bracha is valid, and it absolves all the other foods from benching. And ideally, if he has a kabetza, that's even better, because thereby his bracha until his yadayim is definitely valid. Less than the kabetza is a suffix, but less than the kazayis, it shouldn't be recited at all. So again, this is important to remember. One has a meal, either when one has a bread meal, have an entire kazayis, at least an entire kazayis beginning of the meal. Ideally, a beitza, just have the whole beitza in one go. 2 kazayisim is also okay. One kazayis, another kazayis makes a beitza altogether, and eggs with altogether. But the minimum, a kazayis of bread, the beginning of a bread meal, and then after that, we're free to enjoy the rest of the food and bench a bracha achrona, Birkas Hamazon because I wasn't as is appropriate. Thank you, Rabbi Isai. Be matzliach.